Hi, I'm Matt.
Hey, my name's Jess.
We're counselors at App State's Counseling Center here to talk about distress tolerance as part of our Healthy Emotions and Life Skills virtual workshop series. Before we get started today, we have a couple of pieces of informed consent to go over with you. This and our other quick access virtual workshops are not intended to be treatment. They're just psychoeducational in nature, and they're not therapy or an emergency response. If you'd like to learn more about our services, we encourage you to visit our website, counseling.appstate.edu, or give us a call to learn more about treatment options through the Counseling Center. If you're experiencing some type of mental health emergency, like active suicidal thoughts, please visit our website to read more about our emergency resources or call your local emergency responders. Finally, this workshop is being recorded as part of our online workshop series and being shared on our social media. And again, if you are encountering an emergency, check out our website. We have an emergency tab at the top of the screen that provides different emergency resources in the Boone area, within the state of North Carolina, and nationally. So our objectives today, we've got a couple of different objectives in mind regarding distress tolerance. One, we're going to introduce distress tolerance, why these series of skills are going to be important, what their utility is. We'll talk about the role of mindfulness, which we've incorporated throughout HEALS, and what its role is in distress tolerance. We'll talk more specifically about crisis survival skills. We'll help you start building your own coping skills toolbox for managing crises. And we'll leave a little bit of information at the end on how to take this work forward with you. So like all of our other HEALS workshops, we start off with a mindfulness-based activity. Mindfulness is infused throughout our workshop series here, and today's mindfulness exercise is progressive muscle relaxation. In PMR, progressive muscle relaxation, we focus on tensing and relaxing different muscle groups. We're going to notice differences in sensations in the body as we intentionally induce tension and relaxation. And potentially this can be really helpful in helping you to become more aware of where you might be carrying physical tension throughout the day. Maybe it's in your back, neck, shoulders. By purposefully engaging in something like PMR, it might be easier for us to notice this and to change course to manage stress. So as an example, we'll guide you through a progressive muscle relaxation exercise. For this exercise, it's best to be seated upright in a chair with your back straight and your feet planted firmly and flat on the ground if possible. Take a few deep breaths at your own pace to get started to help get us centered. When you feel ready, I'd like for you to close your eyes and bring your attention towards your calf muscles. Maybe there's feeling or sensation in your calves. If there is, feel free to notice and investigate without judgment, just with an attitude of openness and curiosity. Once you've focused in on your calves, I'd like for you to initiate tension in the calves by raising your heels off the ground and clenching your calf muscles to 70 to 90% of your maximum mobility, and hold the tension in the calves. Really feel what this tension is like. And now release the tension, letting your heels sink back to the ground and no longer working the calves at all. Now notice any feelings of relaxation that might be entering the body through the calves. Just take a moment to explore this feeling. And once more, tense the calves, lifting your heels off the ground. Hold this tension. Really investigate what it's like. And now relax, letting the heels return to the ground and letting relaxation enter the body. Now that we've completed our focus on our calves, I'd like for you to move your attention up your body to the glutes. These are the muscles on the seat of the chair. Hold tension in the glutes Squeezing the glutes together, you might notice a slight rise off of your chair. As you do so, really hold and notice this tension. And release, letting yourself sink completely into the seat and becoming aware of any feelings of relaxation that might be entering the body. And once more, hold tension in the glutes, squeezing the glutes together. Really hold and notice this feeling of tension. And relax. Just being aware of any sensations in your body at this time. Finally, I'd like for you to turn your attention upwards again to the neck and shoulders area of your body. This is a really common place for where people hold tension. Here, we're going to raise our shoulders to our ears, holding tension here, really noticing what that feeling is like, and relax, letting your shoulders droop down, maybe even further than they were when we started, and letting relaxation enter that part of the body. And now once more, raise shoulders to ears, really holding our tension here. And now relax, noticing this tension leaves and relaxation enters. That was just a quick example of what a progressive muscle relaxation exercise could look like. They can be done at your own pace, involving a couple of muscle groups, or it could be a complete body progressive muscle relaxation. It could be much more involved. There's lots of different guided meditations online or on various forms of media that you can check out and incorporate in your own self-care and your own mindfulness practice. For now, I'm going to turn it over to Jess to talk a little bit about how distress tolerance is different from one of our other modules, emotion regulation.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks for leading us through that exercise. So yeah, how is distress tolerance different? Well, if we think about the difference between emotion regulation and distress tolerance, we can kind of think about once we're in distress, you're usually focused on getting out of the distress, which is usually a short-term experience of pain or crisis. And sometimes when we're trying to get out of that feeling of distress, we end up moving ourselves backward. And this is, could be physical distress or emotional distress. So what we're going to talk about today is what if instead of trying to avoid it, we worked to understand it and make meaning of and even tolerate what it was that we were going through in order to move forward. So if we're tolerating and having a better understanding, we're moving forward through this experience instead of backwards to escape out of it. So we'll kind of discuss a little bit more about that in a couple different ways today, but just if you can start thinking about times that you have felt distressed and maybe how you solve that problem, you'll have a good example of that feeling of just trying to get out of your pain or your crisis at any means possible. So we're going to try to throw a wrench in that system in a good way to where we can kind of think of other options today. So practicing distress tolerance, we want to think about the skills that help us accept the current moment, our current situation, and to accept ourselves. And we're not saying here that the acceptance means an approval of the situation or the pain. We can accept reality and we can tolerate reality without it meaning that we are giving the situation our approval. But this is one way to survive the situation without digging ourselves into a deeper hole or making it worse for ourselves. So again, not accepting what's going on in the sense that we've given it approval, just a mindful and non-judgmental acceptance of what it is that's happening, that's going on. And if we become grounded in our own mind and body, become comfortable and stable, we're at a better advantage to make decisions moving forward than we would be if we were acting out of that acute sort of struggle where, like we said in the previous slide, maybe we'd move backwards. So we'll work on some of those skills. And like I said, examples are really great. So you can all draw from examples in your life where you felt distressed, but we're going to take you through a couple today as well. So let's say that you are trying to get to class by 10 a.m., but you live off campus and it is pouring outside as it does sometimes in Boone, and everybody's on the bus. It's too packed at your stop and the bus doesn't have enough room for you to get on board. So if we think back to the emotional regulation workshop, we talked about that mind-body connection. So because your mind can influence the emotions that you're having, specifically in an instance like this, I could see how it would be really stressful and how it might feel great to cry, or you might need to in that moment, and kind of decrease tension in your body that way. So not saying that that's not appropriate, but let's also think about what else we could do. You know, we could sit there and panic and kind of try to get ourselves out of the distress and say, you know, I'm just not going to go to class today, or have a complete breakdown because it's too hard to think about. Or we could take a few deep breaths, ground ourselves in the moment, think about the facts and say, okay, maybe there's somebody that I know who's going into town that way and I can get a ride, or maybe I could order an Uber to come get me, or maybe I can just email my professor, explain the situation and say I'm going to be late, or ask to Zoom into the lecture. So, you know, we took a moment to feel that feeling of maybe anxiety or stress or panic, noticed it, accepted it, and then thought, okay, what's next though? What are the facts? What do I know and what can I work with? So let's talk through another one and talk through kind of what might go through our heads. So say that there's someone who's in a long distance relationship and she and her partner agree and have a routine of FaceTiming one another Mondays and Thursdays. So it's Thursday night and the partner hasn't picked up any phone calls, hasn't responded to the FaceTime calls, and hasn't responded to any text messages. I would also assume that this would be a very stressful situation filled with worry for some, and other people might be angry, they might feel ignored. So again, not to say that it's bad to have those emotions. What's helpful is to notice them right away. And once you see what they are, say, okay, so this is what I'm feeling. Let me go back to the facts. What do I know? I'm mindful of how I'm feeling, and I'm mindful of what I know, which is someone's not answering a phone call from me, and I expected them to. That's the reality of the situation. So in this moment, the person could send a text message saying, I'm going to break up with you, or that person could immediately call 911 and say, you know, my partner is missing. Or maybe they could engage in some self-soothing skills. Maybe they could call a friend. I know for me, I'd probably have a lot of tension in my body at that moment. It might be nice to do a movement practice like yoga, or to take a nap. So we can kind of reroute our stress-induced decisions to more decisions that are based on us being mindful of our needs, of where we're at, and of the facts of the situation. They're pretty tricky in all circumstances, I would say, and I know that life just presents us with things like this all the time, and it can be hard to just stop and think about the facts, but that's really one of the key drivers of Module 1, the role of mindfulness in distress tolerance. You know, how can we be mindful in a situation where it seems so difficult? So when we're in a crisis or when we are in distress, it is so difficult to call on that wise part of ourselves, our wise mind. It can be hard to stay present and aware of the space around us, aware of our feelings, and it can be really hard to stick to the facts. I think these are times when people often jump to conclusions, and it can be also really difficult to remember our objectives. We also talked about effectiveness and our objective effectiveness, our relationship effectiveness. So say we texted and broke up with the partner in that situation, our relationship effectiveness would have moved down pretty low. We wouldn't have been effective there. But if we can utilize those strategies to be mindful, we are setting ourselves up for more success than the other way. What happens is when we're in crisis, we're trying to fix it. We're trying to get out of the pain or get out of the distressing feelings and just solve it. However, there are so many circumstances where you can't fix a situation that's stressful. Sometimes it just takes getting through it. And it may be more effective in some situations to focus on taking care of ourselves so that we can survive the experience and not maybe make an impulsive decision that's not in our best interest. So if you think about the stress of an exam, there are things that you can do to decrease your stress, such as study, but ultimately you just got to make it through that exam. You can't fix it. You can't just make it go away, They're just ways that we can set ourselves up for success. And taking care of ourselves, super helpful because it's increasing the mindfulness when we're tapping into what it is that we need, when we're aware of our mind-body connection, and when we can make mindful and wise decisions to help us get through crises. When we are mindful, when we are focused, and when we are grounded in the present moment, we usually can identify actions that are specific to each of us that will help us get through the distress. We can usually identify what it is that we need. So those are suggestions today of how to kind of work with distress tolerance and some techniques that you can utilize. And Matt is going to talk about some super distressing moments, those that we often refer to as a crisis. And then we're going to go through some more skills that you can utilize.
All right, thanks a lot, Jess. Like Jess alluded to, crisis survival is a really important part of distress tolerance. There are certain types of crisis moments we might encounter throughout our lives that are especially difficult, and we want to target them with special skills. So first, we got to talk about what a crisis is. And when we're thinking about a crisis, we're talking about a really stressful, distressing situation that has a potential for a significant negative outcome. So when we think about a crisis, a lot of times people think of something like a medical emergency. That's a good example of one, but crises can look different than that. It could be maybe you've suddenly been broken up with by a partner. That could be a crisis moment. We could have just lost a loved one. That can be a crisis moment. Crises are short-term in duration, meaning they have a definitive start point and typically some type of definitive end point. They're not chronic. They don't go on forever, even if in the moment that they're happening, it feels like they're going on forever. Any situation where we're feeling challenged and we feel pulled to slap on a Band-Aid or engage in some type of quick fix, that might be a moment where we're in a crisis and need to use our crisis survival skills. There's all sorts of different ways to handle a crisis, and all of the different methods we might use will have different outcomes. Here's a non-exhaustive list of some different strategies that people use to handle moments of crisis. Take a look. It may be the case that you've used some or all of these at various points, and I imagine they've had varying levels of success. If we're being attacked by someone, often our fight or flight response might kick in, and that might be what we need to do to get through that situation. If we've just lost a loved one and that same fight or flight response comes up, that may be less adaptive. So even though these strategies might be come up, they might be differently useful in different situations too. So this isn't just a blanket list of these are all good or all bad, but we need to tailor our skills to the situation. And depending on what we use to handle that situation, we might have some different outcomes, more positive or more negative. As part of HEALS, it's also important that we talk about helping to give you some different skills for tolerating distress in these crisis moments. So our skill today is called ACCEPTS. We'll go through the acronym here. There's different elements of distraction for each letter. So sometimes when we're getting through a crisis, there's nothing we can do about it, or we're too dysregulated to handle it effectively, we need to distract ourselves or take ourselves away from that crisis for a little bit of time in order to regroup and more effectively handle it. And that's what accepts is all about. How to give yourself the time and space you need to regroup and eventually face the issue. So our A is for activities in our active accepts. Maybe, depending on what the crisis is, we've got an opportunity to do something we like, playing a game, running outside for a little bit, calling a friend that we really like talking to for a laugh, anything that could be an activity that could really help us pull ourselves away from that moment we're trying to handle. That might be what we need. C is for contributing. This one's a little bit less intuitive to people, but let's say we're feeling really down, something really negative has happened. It can be the case that giving back to others in our community makes us feel really good. Sometimes people find that even in moments of acute crisis, doing something nice for other people can still positively influence their mood. And that's really powerful. So depending on where you're at, maybe contributing to other people, doing something thoughtful, even if it's something small, could be what you need to get through. Changing our frame of reference, changing our thinking around a crisis can also be really helpful. So instead of focusing solely on the negative aspects of the crisis, maybe we can compare ourselves in a different way to others in similar situations. You might think that, well, maybe I'm not handling this crisis the best that I could, but I imagine there's other people who would not be handling it as well as I am right now. So instead of I'm all bad or this is all bad, actually, maybe it's somewhere more in the middle, or we pulled ourselves back from that really negative thinking, and that can be helpful in helping us to get through the crisis itself. Could be also helpful to think about even worse situations than the one you're currently in. That can be a way of making our current crisis feel just a little bit smaller or a little bit less significant, and as a result, a little bit easier to handle. Different emotions, changing our emotional experience can also be a powerful tool that we can have at our disposal to use here for crisis situations. So if we're in a crisis, a lot of times crises provoke different emotions. If we have the ability to change our emotional experience, we might have control over other aspects of the crisis too, like other parts of our response. So maybe we're feeling really depressed as the result of a crisis or an emergency situation. Maybe as a result, we want to change that depression to something a little bit more positive, like reading positive old messages that you've gotten from other people, or watching some stand-up comedy, something that makes you laugh. If we can introduce a different emotion, maybe we can sort of break that really bad, overarching negative feeling that we're in that moment and be more effective later on. The P in accepts is for pushing away. This is a really overt act of distraction, getting away from the situation for a little bit. Maybe we're going to close our eyes and envision ourselves in a better situation or a better place, somewhere we like to look at, maybe a favorite vacation spot. We're taking a bit of a mental vacation here. If we notice ruminative thoughts come up where we're dwelling on the past or things that have happened, we can use mindfulness to detect that that's happening and then replace those with alternative thoughts or distraction. We can now build an imaginary wall between us and the crisis. The crisis hasn't gone away, but we've put a little bit of space in between us and it. We get to exist outside of that crisis, if only for a couple of minutes. That's what pushing away can help us do. The T is for other thoughts, changing our cognitive experience instead of our emotional experience as we were before. Let's redirect our attention or our focus elsewhere. Instead of just thinking about the crisis over and over, maybe we're going to count to 100 or count backwards from 100 by sevens. Something challenging that takes our mind off of this for a little bit. Thinking about song lyrics and repeating them in your head faster and faster each time you go through. Or doing word puzzles, Sudoku, taking a moment for yourself to engage in something cognitively taxing or cognitively challenging that's not the crisis. And finally, the S stands for sensations, namely bringing up other sensations where we change our sensory experience. So if we talked before about using our senses to self-soothe, using taste, touch, vision, all of these can be really, really helpful in getting out of our head, getting out of our negative feelings, and just re-engaging with our body and our immediate environment. Maybe we're going to hold an ice cube and notice that it's really, really cold over time. Or we're going to take a warm shower and notice that that's inducing feelings of relaxation. Maybe we'll listen to music really loud to amp us up or change our negative emotional experience into an excited, activated one. Self-soothing with the five senses is a really cool way to extend some of that distress tolerance accept skill. So, and there's all sorts of different ones. Take some time now to think about what you might put in each of these categories. Visually, maybe we're going to look at stars if we have the ability to see those at night, or we'll look on the internet for pieces of art that really speak to us. Maybe we'll hear some soothing music we like, make a playlist, and then listen to it. For smell, maybe there's a favorite scent or oil. Maybe you have popcorn that you can make, something pleasurable or enjoyable there. Taste, maybe you've got access to your favorite foods or a snack you like. Maybe you'll have dessert, even if it's in the afternoon. Something to change up that experience and re-engage with that sense. Touching, maybe playing with a pet, using a lotion you enjoy that helps make your skin feel more smooth, wrapping yourself in a blanket and just enjoying that physical experience can again be a powerful way to distract yourself, at least in part, from the moment of crisis, helps you to recover, and then re-engage with that crisis a little bit later on in a more effective way. That's what we're doing with accepts, and that's what we're doing with self-soothing. I want to just talk with you a little bit more about making a coping toolbox, which can be a really additional powerful tool for navigating moments of distress and crisis.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. It definitely can. Sometimes when we're in crisis, right, it can be really difficult to navigate. And we talked about how it can be difficult to remember the facts or difficult to feel grounded. And so having something set up for you to just go to in times of stress and when it's really hard to tolerate that stress can be a way to set yourself up for some success in the future. And so that kit can include a lot of what we talked about today, but it is going to be individualized to the things that make sense to you. It's going to be something that you get to have, like we said, in advance, and it can be easily accessible. So somewhere in your room or in your apartment. And I like the quote that we have, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So really, what can we do to get out ahead? And some of the images that you'll see on the screen are alluding to some of the things that can be in your coping toolbox. So you could have one of your favorite treats in there. We just talked about engaging with your senses, like maybe eating dessert, who knows when it is, morning, afternoon, or night. But it can be soothing and can be grounding to engage in your senses. And I do that oftentimes with baking. Sometimes that gets me out of my headspace. I have to engage in the recipe and follow the directions. And then at the end, get a really nice reward. And it keeps me busy for maybe an hour and a half. I also see that tea is on here. And that is something that a lot of people find to be a mindful experience, making something hot and breathing in the aroma of tea. Something that I mentioned before is a movement practice, such as yoga or Tai Chi or Pilates. Some people love to put on music and dance. That can be a great way to kind of get engaged with your body and feel the sensations that you have in your body, kind of change up your physiology and your biology as well with some hormones that will be released by practicing exercise for 20 to 30 minutes. Matt mentioned comedy, which is awesome. Comedy, film, Netflix. Sometimes we do need to zone out. That can be a helpful coping strategy, and diving into something entertaining that can totally soak up your attention. I myself also, I keep a box of cut up magazine clippings so that they're ready for me to collage with. And sometimes I think that's a helpful way to engage in the arts because it is not, I don't have to think too much. I can just kind of pick up the images and put them down wherever I think it looks good. And that's something that sits and waits for me. But I also think of some of those adult coloring books. There's lots of intricate patterns in some, and others are simpler. But regardless, I would go with whatever calls your attention, draws your eye, and can suck you into that page, putting down whatever colors you want to see that might feel soothing. This can also be as simple as reading a book that's in your coping toolbox or making your space more comforting. So using aromatherapy with a diffuser or some essential oils, a room spray, or a candle maybe in your apartment, incense. some of those things, like a candle specifically, has visual ambiance and can be one of those ways to engage in your senses, but it also can fill the room with calming and warm smells. So your coping toolbox is going to look different than your friends, is going to look different than mine or than Matt's. The thing is that it's individualized for you, for the things that you know would bring you comfort in a moment of need, and that can be readily accessible. So it can be filled with things that you already have in your apartment, or it can be something that you make more of an event of. This is preemptive self-care, and self-care in itself to just set up a box like this. So maybe it is going out and putting a new candle in your box, or putting a workout DVD in there, although I'm realizing right now that probably nobody is putting a DVD in a box. We would be streaming something. But you get the point. Make it your own, and definitely set it up for the things that are individualized to you and unique about you, and that would help you feel good in the time of stress.
All right, thanks, Jess. And thank you all for tuning into our video today. As far as next steps, ways to extend the material that you've heard here today, if you haven't already, feel free to check out the Counseling Center's Instagram page or our YouTube channel for our other HEALS workshops on mindfulness, emotion regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness that all accompany this workshop. There's other great quick access workshops on being more kind to yourself and more self-compassionate, as well as managing moments of anxiety, that are also available as part of our quick access workshop series. You can also check out our website to see if we're running these workshops live and what times and dates you might be able to tune in for those. Or check out our website or give the Counseling Center a call if you're interested in getting connected for other types of services. We've also got a lot of self-help materials on our website that accompany these workshops and apply to lots of different other problems and concerns. Other than that, thank you so much for stopping by.
Thanks, Al.